Houston, are you ready for the event?
Houston Station, I'm ready.
Meltwater PR Summit, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Copy, Houston. Station, this is Ben Kessler from Meltwater Summit live in New York City. How do you hear me?
Hey, welcome to the International Space Station. I hear you loud and clear. How me?
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming NASA astronaut Jonny Kim. Jonny, there's about 1,300 attendees here watching you live, and you have two voices you'll be hearing from. This is Ben Kessler here, and it is an honor to speak with you, sir. And I also have Brittany Brown from NASA, and I'll let Brittany say hi as well.
Hi, Jonny. This is Brittany from NASA's Office of Communications. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. How are you, Brittany?
Things are great. Any day that we can talk to space is a fabulous day from where I sit.
Jonny, the theme of this conversation is leadership and teamwork in extreme conditions. So my first question to you, when is the first time you realized that a decision you were making as a leader was impacting more than just yourself and your team?
Hey, first off, man, I got to say this is probably one of the most exciting topics I've come across for a PAO event since I've been up here. I saw we only have 20 minutes, so this will have to be a little lightning round, but I feel like we could talk about this for hours. It's a great question. You know, I had a really fortunate opportunity early in my life to be in a really operational job, having joined the military at a young age. So I would say it was really on some of my first overseas deployments where I, though wasn't a commissioned officer, had the responsibility and leadership over other people, and that had real life consequences. And it was a stark contrast in my life up until that point, and it made me realize that the decisions we make can have absolutely big impacts on other people.
Jonny, I have the next question for you. Your experience is nothing short of extraordinary. After everything you've been through, from serving in combat, your experiences as a doctor, your current space flight, what do you find to be a ubiquitous topic or leadership principle that is universally inspiring for people, no matter the mission or the team?
I think I could list a lot of things, but the one thing that I think is ubiquitous that transcends every discipline, every experience that I've been a part of, is the human connection. And I think everyone who's watching this can resonate with that. Human connection is something that we all need and really crave now more than ever. And that is an absolutely important fundamental of being a leader, is being able to connect with the people that you have to answer to.
Jonny, I want to pivot to the power of imagery, communications, and branding. You were speaking to a room of marketers and communicators from across the world. What is the role of imagery and branding at the space station, and what role do you play as a key communicator to how the space station is talked about around the world?
You know, through thousands of generations, humanity has told its history through human stories. And I think that is no different today. I mean, the role of imagery on the space station, space science, exploration, everything that we do has to have that fundamental human connection. And so that's what I firmly believe is my role and our roles, is not only to do science, but to tell that story, that really human story, to the rest of the people on Earth, so they can learn and appreciate all of the amazing things going on here on the International Space Station.
Wonderful. Most leaders have a unique way of managing a team that they have handpicked. As a leader, can you share any perspective on how to lead a team that you inherited as opposed to a team that you've built?
You know, I hate to keep parlaying previous answers, but I think it's all relatable. We don't often get to choose the people that we have to work with. And so, of course, developing, you know, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to leadership. And in my experience, have found that everyone needs to kind of deliver their own style into the leadership that they find. But the one common thread among all that is always going to be that human connection I keep harping to. And even for disjointed teams that that you've just kind of happened to be placed in a situation that you're in charge of, finding a way to adapt and find that human connection amongst all your team members is a critical component to making really strong, high-performing teams.
Jonny, I have a somewhat curious question for you that I've always wanted to ask. What is your favorite orbital trajectory of Earth? I've heard you speak about your favorite view of Earth, but what is your favorite path around Earth itself?
You know, every time, even this morning, I looked out and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I get to do this as my job. I had a beautiful view of the oceans. There's so much blue on our planet. I'm sure you all know that, but it is very noticeable for us up here. You know, I think any place where I look down and I can say, hey, I know someone there, or I have a friend, or I've got a family member there, or I spent a summer there as a kid. Again, those human connections, that's what's really important for me. And those have always been my favorite views and trajectories on the space station.
This year marks 25 years of continuous human presence on the space station. What does that mean to you, Jonny, and what are the lasting impacts of the station's legacy?
It means so much. You know, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And that statement is no more, I mean, there's no place that's more truer than here on the space station. I mean, 25 years, that is a really long time. It's great that most young adults, for their entire lives, there has existed a human presence on the space station. And I think that speaks to the marvels of engineering, but also of international collaboration, because this is an international joint venture, has been for 25 years. And I think it speaks volumes for where we're going to be headed to in the future. I'm excited.
Jonny, the information environment is of great interest to everybody in this room. And the way humanity is consuming information is rapidly evolving. I'm curious how you personally consume information, both on Earth and in space, and how that has shifted over your lifetime.
This is one of my favorite topics, is learning, just learning new information. But before I answer, I will tell you my personal preference of how I do it, which just happens to be the same on the space station and on Earth, because we do have access to the internet up here, is that we live in an information-rich age. And I really believe that before the consumption of information, we really need to develop the ability to critically think, which means we need to be able to objectively analyze, read, and come to conclusions that are our own. And I think that's a critical thing that everyone needs to have before you seek information, because there's so much stuff out on the internet. The way I used to consume information, a lot of it happens to be through the internet, through internet searches, reading articles. I try and stick to the source as much as possible, whether that's a textbook or a journal article. But I found myself more lately actually using AI. It's cut down a lot of my searching, where I would say it's the same type of information gathering that I do, but it helps condense my search and makes it a lot more efficient.
Jonny, I'd like to know what stories, whether they're NASA stories or space station stories, that you've heard or read, or general stories that have not been told that you think should be told. You're talking to the world's most powerful storytellers, so this is your chance to inspire this audience.
You know, you all have a really big responsibility, and a very important one. And that's telling human stories. And what I think there need to be more stories of are stories of struggle, of failure, of loss, of losing your way and finding it, redemption, vulnerability. I think one of the worst disservices we can do is tell a story of success that completely omits the challenges and the hardships and the failures, because everyone who's had a successful story, behind that person is just a tremendous amount of failure and hardship. And I think that those are the stories. Really focusing on that is what connects people and makes them relatable. That's what I would like to hear more of.
Jonny, you talked about vulnerability. I'm curious what role vulnerability plays in team leadership, and especially in extreme environments where the stakes are high and failure is sometimes not an option. Is there room for emotional transparency in leadership?
So like a lot of things, it depends. And I think you said emotional transparency is important, but don't mistake emotional transparency for emotional liability. Now, you said teams in extreme environments. So that extreme word is pretty important. In extreme environments, it's really important for team leaders and members of the team to be able to compartmentalize. It is a common trait among all high-performing teams, is to be able to decouple the stress of the current problem in front of you, siphon it away, compartmentalize it in a part of your brain so they can deal with it later. That's different from being vulnerable when time allows. And so to answer your question, absolutely, emotional vulnerability is essential for a well-rounded, good leader. And, we don't have enough time, but that's a topic that I'm personally very passionate about, and something that I don't feel like I really got a good understanding of until later in my life.
Jonny, I really love your passion about leadership. And continuing along that theme, what is the leadership habit or mindset that you've adopted from your work that you think every executive should consider adopting?
I wish we had more time to talk about this, but I think some of the things that are important for me, one is never remembering or never forgetting where you came from. And so there's a lot of famous quotes that kind of harp on the same thing, but I really think it's really important for leaders, especially as they rise to the ranks, to not lose sight of what it's like to be part of the rank and file. Rank and file is a euphemism for essentially like your like common team member or someone that's maybe lower on the totem pole. And the reason why I think this is important is that I think it's really natural for us as we rise to the ranks to kind of forget where we came from. But I think, again, to that human connection, that theme I keep talking about, remembering where you came from and what it's like to be part of that rank and file is really, really important. I also think integrity is an absolutely important part of leadership, and there's a lot more we could talk about, but those are the two that kind of stick out on the top of my mind.
Jonny, you've been on station for a couple weeks, and you've also had the opportunity to interact with crew members, many of whom are not NASA astronauts, of course. And I'm curious how you find commonality with folks you'll be living and working with, and what kind of stories you found that are similar across a broad array of cultures that inspire a diverse, wide array of astronauts to pursue the field.
It's a great question, and it's actually probably one of the easier things about being an astronaut is being able to get along with all the crew members on station. All of the crew members living here, they are my brothers and sisters. They're good friends, colleagues. We have a lot of trust in each other. We talked about extreme environments, and when you're in a situation where you have to put your life in someone else's hand, it necessarily is going to result in a lot of trust and kinship. And so that transcends race, transcends gender, nationality. We have multiple nations that are being represented currently on an International Space Station, and I flew up with 2 cosmonauts. So it's actually quite easy. And that human connection theme I kept coming back to is something that we all understand.
Jonny, what are some of the habits that you brought over to NASA from your previous experiences?
So this one makes me chuckle. So certainly the military's, 15. If you're not 15 minutes early or late, I'd say I'd probably have relaxed a little bit on that. 2 is 1, 1 is none. It's kind of a old saying of always have a backup plan or backup item. And I don't know if this is a habit that's been brought forward. I've never really been a morning person, but I would say my previous occupations changed that for me, and it's kind of continued since I've been at NASA.
Jonny, recently a Cargo Dragon autonomously docked station while you monitored from the station itself. That must have been pretty surreal. I'm curious how you see these kinds of space-based advancements in autonomy and in AI shaping life back here Earthside.
Yeah, the train of autonomy and AI is coming, and there's nothing to stop that. And I think that's both exciting, exhilarating, and scary. I think it's good that we're talking about stuff like this. And I see, just like the industrial age and how the industrialization and machines created a void, but also created a lot of new opportunities. And so, in my personal opinion, I do think something like that is coming. I think overall, it will disrupt a lot of processes, but in the long run, will make things more efficient. And, humans are really, really resilient. We are a resilient species, and we adapt very, very well. And just like the industrial age, there will be a future where people will find a place in life to produce and to have a contribution, something that we all deserve and want to have. And so I'm really excited about that age. I want to say it would give us more time. I don't know if that's true, because I think as humans, especially as Americans, we're going to find a way to fill that time to be more busy.
Speaking of busy, I know that lots of experiments are happening on the space station. Can you talk about one of the experiments that you and your crew members are currently working on?
There's a lot of experiments here, anything from material science. There's this really cool material science experiment that our Japanese partners are doing about fluidics and the different alloys of metal. It's pretty cool. I would say I'm not a subject matter expert, so I couldn't talk too much about that. But one of the things that I do know a little bit more about are ourselves. So all NASA astronauts, we are also part of science experiments. And so oftentimes that means, it could mean something like a radiation dosimeter that we wear just to track different radiation levels that we're obtaining throughout our expedition. A lot of it happens to do with blood draws during various times. A lot of body fluids are collected to help NASA and our international partners better understand what the human body goes through in long durations of space. Because as you all certainly know, our plans are to go to the moon and beyond. And if we're going to do that, we need to know with absolute certainty what our bodies go through and how we can mitigate some of the maladaptive changes that happen in space.
Jonny, we have time for one last question. What advice would you give to the next generation of leaders who will one day lead teams in environments we simply can't imagine yet?
No one knows what the future is going to be, but I know one thing is for certain, and humans are going to have a part in it. And if humans are going to have a part in it, that human connection is going to be, I think, even more important than it is now, especially with automation and AI. The ability to work effectively as a team member, as a leader, as a subordinate, those are really important. And it's hard to develop those skills. It requires us to be vulnerable. It requires us to lean into our integrity. It requires us to do challenging things that sometimes we're not going to be comfortable doing. And so I'd say to the next generation, really lean into those challenges, lean into the hard discussions, lean into pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I think you'll learn a lot about yourself and the people you work with.
Jonny, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to speak to you. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your service, and have a great rest of your day flying around the world here.
It was my absolute pleasure. I had a lot of fun. It sounds really fun down there. I wish I could join you all. And so this will be goodbye from the International Space Station.
Station does use an ACR that concludes the event.
Thank you to all participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.